Two men found dead on a hillside in Brazil, 1966. Lead masks covering their faces. A cryptic note beside them. Take capsules after the effect. Await signal. The case was never solved, but the signal never stopped. On Novellas Station, step into a chilling reimagining of the infamous lead mask case. Expect whispered voices in the dark, faceless figures watching from the shadows, and a network that blurs the line between science, ritual, and cosmic horror. This isn't just a mystery, it's an invitation. And once you hear it, you may already be marked. The ninth invitation, only on Novellas Station. Chapter 1. The Signal. The hillside was quiet, save for the wind brushing through the eucalyptus trees. It was the kind of silence that felt staged, too perfect, too deliberate. Miguel stood at the edge of the slope, staring down at the two motionless figures sprawled across the grass. Their bodies were stiff, their faces obscured by smooth, metallic masks that glinted faintly in the dying light. He didn't want to be here. The police had cordoned off the area, but Miguel wasn't with the police. He was a technician, called in to examine the strange devices found near the bodies. Two lead masks, a pair of water bottles, and a folded note with cryptic instructions. Be at the specified location at 4:30. Take capsules after the effect. Protect metals. Await signal. Miguel read the note again, his fingers trembling slightly. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. He glanced at the bodies. No signs of struggle. No wounds. Just two men lying side by side, as if waiting for something. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the hillside. Miguel felt it then, a subtle vibration in the air, like a low hum just beyond hearing. He turned toward the forest. The trees stood still, but something was wrong. The shadows didn't match the light. They stretched too far, bent at angles that defied the slope. He stepped back. Don't go near the masks, the officer had warned. They're not just props. Something's off about them. Miguel hadn't believed it. Until now. He crouched beside the nearest body, careful not to touch it. The mask was smooth, featureless, and cold. Not lead cold, something else. Something deeper. He leaned closer, and for a moment, he thought he heard breathing. Then the radio on his belt crackled. Signal incoming, said a voice. 4:30 exactly. Miguel looked at his watch. 4:29. The hum grew louder. He turned toward the forest again and saw a flicker of light between the trees. Not fire, not a flashlight. Something spherical, pulsing. The note had said await signal. Miguel stood frozen, the wind now swirling around him in chaotic bursts. The bodies remained still, but the masks began to vibrate. And then, at 4:30 sharp, the light vanished. The hum stopped, and Miguel knew whatever they had been waiting for had arrived. But it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for him. A hum in the forest and a light that was never meant for them. Only on Novellas Station. Chapter 2. The Capsule. Miguel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment. The note from the hillside spread out on the table before him. He'd taken a photo, against protocol, but something about the handwriting gnawed at him. It wasn't just rushed. It was panicked, desperate. Take capsules after the effect. What effect? He replayed the moment in his mind. The hum, the flicker of light, the masks vibrating. And then silence. But the silence hadn't felt empty. It had felt full, like something was watching. He zoomed in on the photo. The ink had bled slightly, as if the paper had been damp. But there was something else, a faint indentation beneath the words. He adjusted the contrast. There, a second message, barely visible. They said it would be painless. Miguel's breath caught. He leaned back, heart pounding. Who were they? He opened the folder the police had given him. The victims, Manuel and Jorge, were electronics technicians. Smart, methodical, no history of mental illness, no cult affiliations. But they had been obsessed with something called spiritual transmutation, a fringe theory about converting consciousness into energy. Miguel flipped to the autopsy report. No trauma, no poison, no explanation. But there was one anomaly. Traces of an unknown compound in their bloodstream. Inidentifiable. Not in any database. Miguel's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You saw the light. You heard the signal. You're next. He dropped the phone. The room dimmed. Not the lights, his vision. Like a veil was being pulled over his eyes. He stumbled to the window, gasping. Outside, the street was empty. But above the trees, a faint orb hovered. Pale, pulsing. He blinked, and it was gone. Miguel turned back to the table. The note was gone. In its place was a small, silver capsule. Smooth, seamless, cold. He didn't touch it. He didn't move. And somewhere, deep in the walls, the hum began again. An object appears, whispering promises no one should hear. Novellas Station brings the dread closer. Chapter 3. The Watchers. Miguel sat frozen at his kitchen table, staring at the capsule. It gleamed faintly under the weak bulb above, as though it had its own pulse. He hadn't touched it, but the air around it felt charged, humming with a low vibration that seemed to crawl into his bones. The city outside was restless, dogs barking, a car alarm echoing faintly. But inside his apartment, the silence was suffocating. He forced himself to breathe, each inhale shallow, each exhale trembling. You're next. The message replayed in his mind. He reached for his phone, but the screen was black. Dead. He hadn't turned it off. He pressed the buttons, shook it, but nothing. Then, faintly, the reflection of the capsule appeared on the glass screen, though the phone wasn't even facing it. Miguel shoved the phone aside. The hum grew louder. He stood, pacing the room, tried to convince himself this was exhaustion, paranoia. But when he passed the window, he froze. Across the street, in the shadows between two buildings, stood a figure. Tall, unmoving. Its face was hidden, but he could see the outline of something metallic, smooth, oval, featureless. A mask. Miguel stumbled back, heart hammering. He blinked, and the figure was gone. He turned to the capsule again. It hadn't moved, but now it seemed closer, as if the table had shrunk around it. He grabbed a cloth, intending to cover it. But the moment the fabric touched its surface, the hum spiked into a piercing tone. The bulb above flickered violently, casting jagged shadows across the walls. And then he heard it. Whispers. Not from outside, not from the hallway, from inside the capsule. He leaned closer, against every instinct. The whispers were faint, layered, overlapping. Words in Portuguese, English, and something else, something guttural, alien. He caught fragments. Protect metals, signal, painless. Miguel staggered back, clutching his ears. The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, filling the room, pressing against his skull. He slammed his hands against the table, shouting, "Stop!" Silence. The capsule lay still, but the note was back. It sat beside the capsule, folded neatly, as though placed there by invisible hands. Miguel reached for it, hesitating, then unfolded it. The handwriting was different this time, sharper, deliberate. You cannot run. You cannot hide. The masks are not protection. They are invitations. Miguel dropped the paper, his breath ragged. He backed toward the door, fumbling for the lock. But before he could turn it, the hum returned, this time from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The apartment itself was vibrating. And then, from the corner of the room, the shadows began to move. They stretched upward, forming shapes, elongated figures with smooth, featureless faces. Masks without eyes, masks without mouths. Miguel pressed himself against the door, paralyzed. The figures didn't advance. They only stood, watching, silent, waiting. And in that moment, Miguel understood. The men on the hillside hadn't died waiting for the signal. They had answered it. Shadows stretch, masks gleam, and the walls begin to breathe. Experience it on Novellas Station. Chapter 4. The Archive. Detective Helena Duarte had seen her share of strange cases, ritual killings, cult activity, disappearances that never made sense. But the lead mass case was different. The bodies on the hillside had been cataloged, the autopsies filed, the evidence boxed away. Officially, it was closed. Unofficially, it was a wound that refused to heal. She sat in the dim light of the municipal archive, the smell of dust and mildew thick in the air. Before her lay a stack of files marked restricted. She had pulled strings to get them, leaning on favors she wasn't sure she could repay. The first file contained photographs, the two men lying side by side, masks gleaming in the sun. Their hands were positioned oddly, one clutching his chest, the other outstretched as if reaching for something unseen. Helena traced the outlines with her finger, unsettled. The second file was stranger. Notes from a technician who had examined the masks. He claimed they weren't ordinary lead. The alloy was unusual, mixed with trace elements not found in local sources. More disturbing was his final remark. Masks resonate under certain frequencies. Recommend further study. Helena frowned. Resonance? She flipped to the next report. Witness statements. Locals had seen lights over the hillside days before the bodies were found. One farmer described a sphere hovering silently, pulsing like a heartbeat. Another swore he heard voices carried on the wind, though no one was there. Helena leaned back, rubbing her temples. Lights, voices, resonance. It sounded less like a crime and more like a visitation. She opened the final folder. Inside was a letter and signed, written in jagged handwriting. They were not the first. They will not be the last. The masks are invitations, not shields. The capsules are keys. Once taken, the body is discarded, but the mind is harvested. Helena's stomach tightened. Harvested. She closed the folder, but the word echoed in her mind. She thought of the autopsy reports. No trauma, no poison, no explanation. Just two men who had collapsed as if their souls had been pulled out. The archive lights flickered. Helena looked up. The room was empty, but the shadows between the shelves seemed thicker, heavier. She stood, scanning the aisles. Nothing moved, yet she felt watched. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You are close. Stop before they notice. She swallowed hard. Whoever they were, they had eyes everywhere. But Helena wasn't the type to stop. She gathered the files, stuffed them into her bag, and walked quickly toward the exit. As she reached the door, she froze. On the wall opposite, etched faintly into the plaster, was a symbol she didn't recognize. A circle intersected by jagged lines, like a distorted compass. It pulsed faintly, as though alive. Helena touched it. The wall was cold, and then she heard it, the same low hum Miguel had heard. It vibrated through the archive, rattling the shelves, whispering through the papers. Helena backed away, clutching her bag. She knew then, this wasn't just a case. It was a network, a conspiracy that stretched beyond the hillside, beyond the city, perhaps beyond the world itself. And she had just stepped into its center. History hides a network, rituals repeated, minds harvested. Novellas Station uncovers the truth. Chapter 5, Convergence. Helena Duarte drove through the rain-slick streets, the files heavy in her bag and heavier in her mind. The symbol she had seen etched into the archive wall still pulsed in her memory, a distorted compass that seemed to point nowhere and everywhere at once. She had traced its origin through scattered reports, whispers of a group of experimenters who believed consciousness could be converted into pure energy. The trail led her to one name, Miguel Alvarez. Not a suspect, not a perpetrator, a technician, a witness, and, if the reports were true, a victim already caught in the web. Miguel, meanwhile, hadn't left his apartment in 2 days. The capsule sat on the table, untouched, yet it seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour, as though gravity bent toward it. The whispers had returned, sometimes faint, sometimes deafening, always layered in languages he couldn't fully understand. He had stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the hillside, the masks, the pulsing light. The shadows in his apartment had grown bold. They no longer lingered in corners. They stretched across the walls, forming shapes that resembled human figures, faceless and tall. He tried to ignore them, but when he turned his back, he felt their gaze pressing against his spine. Miguel scribbled notes in a frantic hand. They want the mind. The body is irrelevant. The capsule is the key. His handwriting shook, the letters jagged. He didn't know who he was writing for, himself or whoever came after. Helena arrived at his building late in the evening. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick, heavy, charged. She climbed the stairs, each step echoing unnaturally, as though the building itself was hollow. At his door, she paused. The hum was faint but unmistakable. She knocked. Inside, Miguel flinched. The sound of the knock cut through the whispers like a blade. He stumbled to the door, opened it, and stared at Helena with wide, bloodshot eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. Helena studied him. Pale, trembling, but not dangerous. Not guilty, just terrified. "I'm here to help," she said softly. "I know about the masks, about the capsules, about the signal." Miguel's breath caught. "You've seen it too?" Helena nodded. "I've seen enough." She stepped inside. The apartment was dim, the bulb flickering, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. And there, on the table, lay the capsule. Helena froze. The air around it vibrated, faint but undeniable. Miguel followed her gaze. It appeared after the light, after the hum. "I didn't touch it. I swear." "I believe you," Helena said. She approached the table cautiously, her eyes fixed on the capsule. "But it's not just an object. It's a conduit." Miguel's voice trembled. "They're watching. The masks, the figures, they're here." Helena turned. The shadows along the wall shifted, elongating, forming faceless silhouettes. She felt her stomach tighten, her pulse quicken. The hum grew louder. Helena reached for her bag, pulled out the letter she had found in the archive. She placed it beside the capsule. The words seemed to shimmer in the dim light. "The masks are invitations. The capsules are keys." Miguel stared at the letter, then at Helena. "They want me to take it." Helena shook her head. "That's what they wanted Manuel and Jorge to do. And it killed them." The shadows pressed closer. The hum became a roar. Helena grabbed Miguel's arm. "Listen to me. You're not a perpetrator. You're a victim, but you're also a witness. If we can understand this, if we can stop it, we can end whatever they're doing." Miguel's eyes darted to the capsule. "And if we can't?" Helena looked at the faceless figures stretching across the walls, their silent masks gleaming in the flickering light. "Then we'll both be harvested." Two paths collide, and the invitation grows louder. Novellas Station carries the echo. Chapter 6: The Network. Helena sat across from Miguel in the dim apartment, the capsule glowing faintly between them. The hum had subsided, but the silence that followed was worse. Thick, expectant, as though the room itself was holding its breath. She opened her bag and spread the files across the table. "You're not alone," she said. "There are others. Dozens of cases scattered across Brazil, across the world. Different names, different rituals, but the same pattern. Masks, capsules, signals." Miguel's eyes widened. "Others?" Helena nodded. The lead mask case wasn't isolated. It was part of something larger. A network. People who believed they could transcend the body, become pure energy. Some called it ascension. Others called it harvest. She slid a photograph toward him. It showed a group of men in suits, their faces obscured by smooth masks, standing in a circle around a glowing orb. The image was grainy, taken decades ago, but the resemblance was undeniable. Miguel recoiled. "That's what I saw. In the shadows. They're real." Helena leaned closer. "And they're organized. They leave notes, instructions, capsules. They recruit technicians, scientists, anyone curious enough to follow. Once you've seen the signal, you're marked." Miguel's hands trembled. "Marked for what?" Helena hesitated. "For conversion." The word hung in the air like a curse. Miguel stood, pacing the room. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to see the light. It found me." Helena followed him with her eyes. "That's how it works. They don't wait for volunteers. They choose. And once chosen, you're part of the network whether you accept it or not." Miguel stopped at the window. Outside, the street was empty, but faint reflections shimmered in the glass. Figures standing just beyond sight, masks gleaming. He turned back, pale. "They're watching." Helena gathered the files quickly. "Then we need to move. If they've already marked you, they won't stop. But if we can find the others, those who survived, we might understand what they're doing." Miguel shook his head. "Survived? You think anyone survives this?" Helena pulled out another document, a letter written in jagged script. We answered the invitation. We saw the signal. We endured. The body is weak, but the mind persists. Seek us in the hills. Miguel stared at the words, his breath shallow. Seek us in the hills. Helena folded the paper. There's a hidden network. Not just victims, participants. Some claim they've crossed over and returned. If we can find them, we'll know what Manuel and Jorge were trying to do. And maybe how to stop it. The hum returned, faint but insistent. The capsule vibrated. Miguel backed away. They don't want us to find the others. Helena's jaw tightened. Which means we have to. The shadows along the wall stretched, forming faceless silhouettes. The figures didn't move, but their presence was undeniable. Watching, waiting. Helena grabbed Miguel's arm. Pack what you need. We're leaving tonight. Miguel's voice cracked. And if the network finds us first? Helena glanced at the capsule, its glow intensifying, the hum rising. Then we'll know exactly what kind of invitation we've refused. Others have already answered, and they are waiting. Novellas Station reveals the unseen. Chapter 7. Encirclement. The rain had returned, hammering against the windows of Miguel's apartment. Helena sat rigid in the chair opposite him, her files spread across the table, the capsule glowing faintly between them. Every time she looked at it, she felt the hum in her chest, like a second heartbeat that wasn't hers. Her phone buzzed again, another anonymous message. You are interfering. He is marked. Leave him. She didn't show Miguel. His eyes were already haunted, his skin pale from sleepless nights. He kept glancing at the window, as though expecting the masked figures to step inside at any moment. Helena leaned forward. Listen carefully. The investigation is closing in. Not on you as a criminal, but on you as a case. You're the link. The others who answer the invitation, they're watching you. Miguel's voice cracked. Others? Here. Helena nodded. In the city. They're not hiding in the hills anymore. They've moved closer. Some live ordinary lives by day, but at night they gather. They were the masks. They wait for the signal, and they know you've seen it. Miguel backed away from the table, pressing himself against the wall. I didn't ask for this. I didn't take the capsule. That doesn't matter, Helena said. You've been chosen. That's enough. The lights flickered. The shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, elongating into faceless silhouettes. Miguel shut his eyes, trembling. Helena stood, her hand instinctively reaching for her gun. But she knew bullets wouldn't matter here. The figures weren't flesh. They were echoes, projections of something larger. She pulled another file from her bag. It contained surveillance photos. Men and women entering abandoned warehouses, carrying briefcases, wearing masks. One image showed a circle of figures around a glowing orb, identical to the one Miguel had described. This is the network, Helena said. They're here. They've already answered the invitation, and they're closing in. Miguel opened his eyes, staring at the photos. His voice was barely a whisper. What do they want from me? Helena hesitated. To finish what Manuel and Jorge started. To prove the harvest works. You're not a perpetrator, Miguel. You're a victim, but you're also their next experiment. The hum grew louder, rattling the glass in the windows. Outside, faint lights flickered in the distance, spheres hovering above rooftops, pulsing like heartbeats. Miguel clutched his head. They're here. Helena grabbed his arm. Then we move now. If the investigation is closing up, we need to stay ahead of it. We find a network before they find you. The shadows pressed closer, faceless masks gleaming in the flickering light. Helena pulled Miguel toward the door. This city isn't safe anymore. Every street, every building, every shadow, they're watching. And if we don't uncover the truth soon, you won't just be marked. She opened the door, the hum roaring in her ears. You'll be taken. The city itself becomes a trap, every shadow a signal. Novellas Station tightens the circle. Chapter 8. The Encounters. The city had changed. Helena felt at the moment they stepped outside Miguel's apartment. The streets were too quiet, the air too heavy, as though the buildings themselves were listening. Neon signs flickered erratically, casting distorted shadows that seemed to linger longer than they should. Miguel walked beside her, his eyes darting to every alley, every window. "They're here," he whispered. "I can feel them." Helena didn't argue. She felt it too. The first encounter. They passed a small cafe, its windows fogged from the rain. Inside, a man sat alone at a table, wearing a suit. His face was obscured by a smooth, metallic mask. No one else seemed to notice. The barista served him coffee as if it were normal. Helena froze, staring. The man raised his cup slowly, deliberately, and tilted his head toward her. The gesture was not friendly. It was acknowledgement. Miguel tugged her arm. "Keep walking." They did. But the hum followed them out of the cafe, faint and insistent. The second encounter. At the subway station, the platform was nearly empty. A woman stood at the far end, her back to them. She wore a long coat, her hair hidden beneath a hood. When the train roared in, she turned, and Helena saw the mask. Smooth, featureless. The train doors opened. Passengers stepped out, oblivious. The masked woman didn't move. She only raised her hand, palm outward, as if signaling. Miguel clutched Helena's sleeve. "That's the signal. That's what they do." The hum grew louder, vibrating through the rails. Helena pulled him back. "Not here. Not now." They fled up the stairs, leaving the train behind. The third encounter. Night fell as they reached the edge of the city. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened under the dim glow of street lamps. Helena led Miguel into a narrow alley, hoping to cut through unnoticed. Halfway down, they stopped. The walls were covered in symbols, the distorted compass Helena had seen in the archive. Circles intersected by jagged lines, etched into brick and plaster, glowing faintly as though alive. Miguel's breath caught. They've marked the city. Helena touched one of the symbols. It pulsed beneath her fingers, sending a shiver up her arm. She pulled back quickly. From the far end of the alley, figures emerged. 3 of them, tall, faceless, masked. They didn't walk. They glided, their movements too smooth, too deliberate. Helena drew her gun, though she knew it was useless. "Stay behind me." The figures stopped halfway, silent, watching. The hum filled the alley, pressing against their skulls. Then, in perfect unison, the figures raised their hands. Palm outward. The signal. Miguel's knees buckled. "They want me." Helena grabbed him, pulling him back. "Not tonight. Not like this." She fired a shot into the air. The sound echoed, but the figures didn't flinch. They only lowered their hands, turned, and melted back into the shadows. The hum faded, but the symbols on the walls glowed brighter. Helena steadied Miguel, her own pulse racing. They're closing in. Every encounter is a test. They're tightening the circle. Masks in cafes, signals in alleys. The circle tightens. Novellas Station whispers the warning. Chapter 9. The Gathering. Helena's research had led her deeper than she ever intended. In the archives of Sao Paulo's University Library, she uncovered fragments of a forgotten society. Engineers, scientists, and mystics who, in the 1940s, called themselves Os Vigilantes de Luz, the Watchers of Light. They believed the human mind was a transmitter, capable of tuning into frequencies beyond the physical world. The masks, crude lead shields, were meant to block interference. The capsules, they claimed, were keys to open the mind fully. But every record ended the same way: silence. No survivors, only rumors of ascended members who never returned. Helena pieced it together. The lead mask case wasn't an accident. It was a ritual repeated across decades, each generation feeding the network. And now Miguel had been chosen. That night, she and Miguel followed the trail of symbols etched across the city walls. The distorted compass led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. Its windows were black, its doors chained, but the hum inside was unmistakable, low, resonant, alive. Miguel's breath came fast. "They're here." Helena steadied her gun, though she knew it was useless. "Stay close." They pushed inside. The warehouse was vast, lit only by a circle of pale orbs hovering above the concrete floor. Around them stood figures in suits, their faces hidden behind smooth masks. Dozens of them, silent, waiting. At the center of the circle lay a table. On it, another capsule, larger, glowing faintly, pulsing like a heart. One masked figure stepped forward, raising a hand in the familiar gesture. Palm outward. The signal. Miguel staggered, clutching his head. They want me to join. Helena pulled him back. No, they want to harvest you. The hum grew louder, rattling the walls, shaking the floor. The masked figures began to move, closing the circle, their faceless visages gleaming in the pale light. Helena raised her voice, defiant. I know your history. I know what you're doing. You're not ascended. You're consumed. The figures stopped. The hum shifted, deeper, darker. Miguel fell to his knees, the capsule on the table glowing brighter, pulling at him like gravity. Helena gripped his arm, her own pulse racing. This is it. The confrontation. If we don't break the circle now, it's over. The masked figures raised their hands in unison. The final signal had begun. The ritual begins, the hum rises, and the harvest draws near. Novellas Station awaits. Chapter 10. The Harvest. The warehouse shook as the hum rose to a deafening roar. Helena clutched Miguel, but the circle of masked figures pressed closer, their faceless visages gleaming in the pale light. The capsule at the center pulsed violently, its glow expanding until it filled the room with blinding radiance. Miguel screamed, his body convulsing. Helena tried to drag him back, but the light pulled at them both, stretching their shadows across the walls until they no longer resembled human forms. The masked figures raised their hands in unison. Palm outward. The final signal. Helena's gun slipped from her grasp. Her vision fractured, splitting into shards of color and sound. She saw the hillside, the cafe, the subway, the symbols etched into the city walls, all converging into one impossible image, a vast network of minds, tethered to the signal, feeding it. Miguel's voice echoed, distorted. They're taking me. Helena reached for him, but her hand passed through his arm as though he were already fading. His body collapsed, but his eyes, behind the mask that had formed over his face, glowed with unnatural light. The capsule pulsed one final time, and then silence. The diary. Weeks later, construction workers found a leather-bound notebook in the ruins of the warehouse. Its pages were scorched, the ink smeared, but fragments remained legible. We thought the masks were protection. They were invitations. The capsule is not a key, it is a door. Once opened, there is no return. They are not ascended. They are consumed. Their minds feed the signal, stretching across cities, across worlds. I saw Miguel taken. His body fell, but his mind was harvested. I felt them reach for mine. I resisted, but I am marked. If you read this, you are marked too. The final page was blank, save for a single symbol etched into the paper. The distorted compass, pulsing faintly, as though alive. The light consumes, the diary remains, and the invitation spreads. Novellas Station marks you. Epilogue. The reconstruction. The diary was passed from hand to hand, each investigator adding their own notes, trying to rebuild the sequence of what had happened in the warehouse. The official report was sterile. Collapsed structure, no survivors, unexplained electrical anomalies, but the fragments told another story. A timeline began to emerge. The signal, first sighted as hovering lights above rooftops, accompanied by the hum. The invitation, the masks appearing in public spaces, silent figures acknowledging chosen witnesses. The capsule, delivered without explanation, vibrating with unseen energy, demanding to be taken. The convergence. Helena and Miguel drawn into the warehouse, surrounded by the network. The harvest, the final signal, the blinding light, the disappearance of both bodies. But the diary added details the reports ignored. Voices layered in multiple languages, symbols etched into walls that pulsed faintly, and the chilling assertion, if you read this, you are marked too. The investigator compiling the notes paused, staring at the final page. The distorted compass symbol seemed to shimmer under the lamp, as though alive. He rubbed his eyes, convinced it was fatigue. Then he heard it, a faint hum, low, resonant, vibrating through the desk, rattling the pen in his hand. He looked around the archive room. Empty, silent. But when he turned back to the diary, A new line had appeared beneath the symbol, written in jagged script. The next invitation has already been sent. The hum grew louder, and somewhere beyond the walls, faint lights flickered in the night sky. Miguel's voice was hollow, and when the circle closes, Helena looked at the glowing symbols. The memory of the masked figures burned into her mind. Then the confrontation begins. The sequence rebuilt, the hum returns, and the next invitation is already sent. Novellas Station never lets go. And that concludes tonight's descent into the ninth invitation. Now we turn to you. Did the story pull you deeper into the mystery or leave you wanting something different? Tell us in the comments what gripped you, what you'd like to hear more of, or what kind of tales you want us to explore next. If you enjoyed this journey into shadows and signals, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support keeps the invitations coming. This is Novellas Station, where every story leaves a mark.